Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be on this knife, and this is the Cheburkov Urbis. And first of all, I want to thank Paul, who is a fellow Barlow Bearcat, for allowing me to check out this knife and do this review. I don't think that this is a knife I would have been able to check out if not from Paul's help. So I really appreciate that. Anytime someone is willing to let me, check out a knife, especially a knife that I wouldn't otherwise have been able to, it's something that I really do appreciate. So thank you again to Paul for this opportunity. And this is a knife that I had heard of Cheburkov before. It's one of those Russian knife makers that, you hear of being really well made, but don't know a whole lot of information about. There's, of course, even more so now, difficulty in kind of finding information out about knives made in Russia. And that was true before the current war that's happening, but it's, I'm sure, even more true now that that is happening. And there's probably fewer, if any, I would guess, knives coming into the US from Russia. So it's an interesting thing because of that. And frankly, I had a lot of trouble finding information about Cheburkov and this knife in general. But part of that is because the box here is mostly in Russian. So you can see it does say Urbis, Damascus, Titanium, Cheburkov, but then it comes with a card which is entirely in Russian. So it seems to be kind of a certificate, a certificate of authenticity. You can see there's kind of a signature down there, a stamp, there's a serial number. I believe this is the date here. So it was made March 18th of 2021, or maybe March 17th of 2022, something along those lines. And then there's some measurements in millimeters. Not a big millimeter guy myself, growing up using inches, I don't, can't translate them immediately in my head, but it does have just over a 3-inch blade, I believe. I believe it's like 3.05 inches, the blade. So one video I watched to kind of try to find more information on this knife emphasized that that's a frustrating blade size because some places, do have a 3-inch blade length limit, and the 3.05 inches is like, you might as well have made it 3 inches or way more than 3 inches. And they do have an XL version of this that I found. So I think the XL would probably be what I would be looking for if I was going to try to pick one of these up permanently. But as for the other specs on there, I'm not real sure, and it was hard to find specs even online for this. I only found like 2, maybe 3 listings for these knives, and maybe only one for the Damascus version on, US American-based stores. So definitely tough to find information. But what I did find is that, first of all, Urbis is actually Latin. It is not Russian. It's a Latin word that means of the city. So I think that that goes along with the fact that this is a pretty fancy and not a huge knife. I know that they do make some pretty large knives, but this one is intended as kind of an urban carry, something that you can carry in the city without it being too scary, obtrusive, whatever. Now, for me, I don't have to worry about blade length and don't really too much have to worry about how scary my knives are. I work at an MMA gym, so it doesn't really matter too much. But I think that that's kind of the meaning behind the name Urbis, is that it's a little bit more refined and a little bit smaller than some of their other knives. From what I can tell, this is the only Cheburkov I have actually gotten to check out in person. The other thing I found was that the Cheburkov factory has been making knives since 2001, I believe, and is in the town of Poplova, which is 420 kilometers east of Moscow on the Oka River. And I'm sure I'm saying a lot of these things incorrectly, but I just tried to find as much information as I could. And like I say, it was difficult. Now, to be completely honest, I did not notice that there is a Cheburkov.com on this sheet here, and I did not check that out, I don't believe. So that probably would have been a good place to check out. Now, another thing about this knife that I did find, well, I guess it's not that hard to find because it's on the blade, is that this is ZDI 1016 steel. I found a little bit of discussion about that steel on blade forums, but it didn't go into too much detail. It had some metallurgical information that I couldn't really process very well. And basically, it seems to be a somewhat stainless Damascus. So it's not Damasteel, which is a brand of stainless Damascus, but it's something along those lines. It's probably not like a super steel in how it's, going to hold an edge and things like that, but it is stainless and it is very pretty Damascus. Again, I think one of the big intentions for this knife is that it be very good looking. And it is good looking. Aside from the stainless Damascus blade, it has a good looking handle. I would say that this is a nice handle shape that it has. You can see that it has some milling along the spine here, and then really oversized pivot, which is, I think, just aesthetic, just kind of a cool look. And then a much nicer than normal cutout for the frame lock. That's one thing I want to point out. Pretty much all frame locks just have kind of a square cutout. This one actually maybe slightly more rounded than a lot of other ones on this ZT, but pretty much, frame locks tend to have just like straight cutouts. Even on this Axial, you can see there's 3 cutouts. So a little technical difficulties there, but on most frame locks, the cutout is more straight, and this one has a nice curved cutout. So it does continue, it does go along with the general kind of curved look of this knife, which the clip also does. You can see that this is a nice milled clip here, and it goes, along with that same curved aesthetic. Now, I want to be honest, I didn't carry or use this knife because it's on loan. I don't, want to mess up someone's knife. And I think Paul is I know he's very willing to make me a really, really good deal on this knife if I would like to keep it. But like I said at the beginning, it's a little smaller than I would probably prefer, especially being that there is a larger version that if I was going to get one, I could get. And it's an ergonomic handle, so my hand fits. It's nice feeling, but it's just a little short for me, particularly because this flipper goes pretty far down onto the handle. I think if the flipper was a little higher up, it might give me a little bit more space, because as is, you can see my pinky's kind of landing right at the edge of the handle, right at that kind of corner. Now my thumb lands on the thumb ramp, so that's nice and everything, but it just feels like there's a lot of space that I could be using to get a full 4-finger grip. But because of the shape of this kind of tang and the jimping, I don't love the feel of choking up on it. So I think that the XL version would really be the one for me, particularly because when I am carrying a knife, I typically am carrying both a modern knife and a traditional knife, and the traditional knife is often the smaller knife and the one that maybe I would pull out if I wanted to have something that was unobtrusive, not scary, and not likely to raise feathers. But the construction of this knife is very nice. It's very smooth, as you can see. You can definitely let it drop closed. It's nice and smooth. You can also have your thumb a little higher so it doesn't hit your, the edge doesn't hit your thumbnail, but it flips nicely. Even with this pretty small flipper, you can see that this flipper is pretty small and unobtrusive, not going to get in the way in your pocket probably, and it flips nicely, has a lock bar insert, and even when unlocked here, no blade play, just nice and smooth and well done, also well centered, maybe like half a millimeter over to this side, but pretty much as close to perfect as it needs to be, in my opinion. So certainly a well-made knife. I think a well-designed knife too, a very good looking knife. And I think for someone with, maybe smaller hands, or, that has a preference for a smaller knife, I think this would be a really great option. Now, one thing is I had a lot of trouble finding any prices for these, particularly for this Damascus version. I did find a couple of the non-Damascus versions that were out of stock, but showed the prices still, and they were in like the low to mid $500 range. So I would imagine that this Damascus version is, a good bit more, $600-700, something like that. Again, it's hard to tell. I'm not 100% sure. I saw, I think, a non-Damascus version selling secondhand on Reddit for $350, and that's, I think a good price for a knife of this quality, especially, depending on what your thoughts are on having a knife from Russia, but definitely it is a nicely made knife, and I really appreciate the opportunity to check out a knife like this. Like, again, as I said, I probably wouldn't have gotten the chance to check out if not for the generosity of Paul. So I want to thank you again, Paul, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.